Ladies and gentlemen, World Awakening Summit with your host, David John St. Clair. And today is a very special honor and pleasure for me. I am passing through your awareness for an hour with a man whose congruency, authenticity, intentions, and inspirations are very dear to my heart. I'm here today with Mr. Stephen Brooks. Stephen is director and senior trainer with the British Hypnosis Research and Training School, and the founder and creator of Future Focused Therapy. So we both know that it's not so very much important which inspiration uplifts you first. But I know that this experience will be wonderful for you. Stephen, I'm so happy and honored to have you with me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I just hope that our communication over the ether between our two countries is good enough for people to understand what I'm saying, and so we can share some ideas.
Wonderful. So I am in Germany. Stephen is in Thailand today. So we have just a straight line of connection between us and you. So Stephen, be so kind and tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Okay. As a teenager, I was always interested in hypnotherapy or hypnosis. I was interested in magic, conjuring, and everything to do with mystery and everything beyond normal everyday reality. And although I never at that time intended to have a career related to any of that, it was always in the back of my mind. I entered the music business, in fact, as a career pretty much very early on after finishing college. And I stayed in the music business for about 10 years. But during that time, I was still following my interests, in everything beyond reality, consciousness, and especially hypnosis, because I saw it had tremendous potential. And then I decided to make a career change, and I was about 35, and I trained as a hypnotherapist. The training was pretty appalling because there was very limited kind of training in the UK at the time of quality. So I was largely self-taught from research papers from an American psychiatrist called Milton Erickson. And I set up in practice, and I practiced for about 12 years, seeing clients every day. I was very busy. I was one of only a few therapists working in that part of England, which is a place called Essex. And I had a practice in 5 different cities. I'd drive to each city, and I would use like hotel rooms, places like this. So I didn't have to rely on a huge client base in one location. I actually had 5 different locations. So I was seeing on average between 5 and 9 clients a day for 12 years. And that's what taught me really about people. My initial reason for going into that was to make a living, to earn money, because I wasn't earning as much as I thought I could in the music industry. But then I realized that people are people. They have their own needs. They have the same right to have a wonderful life as anyone else. And I found myself at that kind of tipping point about a third of the way into my career as a therapist, where the money was coming in anyway. I didn't have to worry about that. I was so busy. So my focus started to become more about helping people have wonderful lives, which means going beyond just fixing problems. Traditionally, therapists fix problems. Well, I found myself in a position of having the luxury of an hour with someone using hypnosis. And obviously, if you're doing something over and over again and you're learning your skills and honing your skills, you become better at it. And I found I actually had more time than I needed to help people. So I would use that time to kind of go into the future rather than just fixing problems. So I started looking beyond the resolution of problems to the benefits that people would have after their problem had changed or disappeared. And that was an important tipping point because it made me think more about, I suppose, compassion for people, love, if you like, for people, wanting them to be successful and have healthy, happy, rewarding lives. And it wasn't intentional, but it just happened. And I found myself in a position where I was focusing more on, if you like, transforming people's lives rather than fixing problems. And then at one point, NLP came along. It was already well established in the UK, in the US, and the very first NLP course that happened in the UK, I actually attended that course. And at the end of the course, the trainers, 2 or 3 of the trainers took me to one side. Robert Dilts, who's a personal friend now, said to me, "Steve, why don't you go and teach? You should teach what you do, because no one's teaching Milton Erickson really in the UK." So I set up training courses, hypnotherapy training courses based on Milton Erickson, the American psychiatrist, who I'd been studying already for 12 or more years. And that's what I did. Okay, and then so I did that for about another 12 years, and then it got to the point where that was so successful in terms of a training body, a training organization as a business. It was so successful that I'd become a businessman rather than a therapist. Mm. And so I lost my heart. You know, the very thing that made me decide to teach, I'd lost it because I was reveling in all of the material success of a very successful business. I had all the trappings of that. And so I decided around about 1997, something like that, that I wanted to just no longer be a business person or businessman and go away and just work on myself. So what I did, I left the UK. I literally gave everything away. I gave a house away. I had a Porsche and all the trappings. I gave everything away. And I went to live in Thailand, and I went up into the jungle in Thailand and stayed in the jungle in Thailand for 9 years, meditating and living off of very basic savings that I kept. And once or twice I did some teaching towards the end of that 9 years in France for a couple of years. And then I stayed and I'm still in Thailand, but I have a different life now, mainly because I had children who needed to go to school, and that costs money unless they go to the local witch doctor, shaman in the village. You know, they have a reasonable education, and in Thailand that costs money, international education. So I started teaching again, and that's what's happened. So, and those kids are now grown up. So I'm not back as a full-fledged businessman anymore. I still have a wonderful, relaxed life in Thailand, and I don't have all the material wealth I had before, but I have a nice house. You know, I actually have a car. I actually bought a car after 12 years of not having a car because my daughter needed to go to school because I have another child now. So I'm kind of not back where I was, thank goodness, but I'm comfortable. Does that make sense? I'm happy and comfortable. And that's really brought us up to date, pretty much with my personal life.
Stephen, the first impression that I had when we started, when the camera loaded and I saw you, I was directly thinking, what an adorable background and what a wonderful room Stephen is sitting in. So that looks really extremely comfortable. And what can a person ask for than to just be comfortable in a wonderful room?
I mean, this is my house now. I mean, I don't have any problems making money. I mean, when I was away up in the jungle, people didn't know what had happened to me. I just literally disappeared off the map. I disappeared at the peak, at the height of my success in the UK. And people were asking, where's he gone? Where's he gone? And luckily, there were certain people who recorded my work on video and on audio, and they pirated it. I mean, I never earned any money from their products, but they put them into new age shops. They was on the internet, on eBay, and they made a good living out of this. These people who were pirating my work, and I found out who they were, and they were a very old couple. And I thought, oh, okay, fine. You know, this maybe subsidizes their pension, so in their old age. So I didn't change that. I allowed them to do it. What I didn't realize was that they were keeping my name alive in the field of hypnotherapy. So when I decided I needed to teach again to make some money to send my kids to school, what I did was I didn't have a mailing list because I closed the whole business down. But I thought maybe people still know who I am. You know, maybe I can do something. So what I did, I grouped together some ebooks and I put them on eBay for $1 for 1 year. And over that 1 year, I sold about 1,000 of these because only $1. And the $1 was just to cover the eBay fees. I didn't make any money out of it. It's basically giving it away. Well, I had about 1,000 new names. And over that year, I then created a 1 year online diploma training in Ericksonian hypnosis. It took me a year to write it. And so I then launched that and I gave it away free of charge. It's like a master's degree quality training. I gave it away free of charge. And of course I contacted
when I met you the first time.
Yeah. Well, that was it. So that was, I don't know how, that was maybe 8 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that. And so I just gave it away and it was amazing because you could see people joining, you know, and it had 6,000 people join the course. And of course, 1,000 of those knew who I was because they'd bought my ebooks and they'd read my work. And now I was giving away a whole year course. And then after that happened, I thought, okay, now I'm ready to do a training where I actually earn some money. And so I then put on a 3-week course, I think it was, maybe short, 2-week course in England, and charged something like £2,000 for it, something like that. I can't remember now. And immediately had 30 people sign up. So suddenly I had £60,000 from nowhere. And that was, my goodness, you know, but it wasn't from nowhere because it was a result of careful planning and giving things. I was just giving we were in a recession. And so all the other organizations cut back on their advertising. Me, because I was giving things away, was getting more advertising. So that changed the balance between myself and my, if you like, so-called competitors. So I had a higher profile. So when I actually did a course, I was very well known. And so straight back into it. And we did that at Roehampton University in London. And I immediately had 30 people. So it was not a big problem. I mean, it was luck, but also maybe thinking ahead, you know, and I was able to make an income. You know, I'm not mega rich. I don't earn as much money as I used to, but it doesn't matter. And property, and I live in Thailand. Property in Thailand is very, very cheap. Exactly. I mean, this is a big house, but this in England would be millions. But here, it's like this is like £200,000.
Wow.
It's a lot cheaper here, so it looks like I'm very rich, but I'm not.
You know, from everything you say, I would say the richness is extremely present here. Mm. And from this center, a lot of other aspects of richness definitely emerge. So as we are in the World Awakening Summit, what you talked about in your own story, there definitely have been some groundbreaking moments of awakening. Like, I don't want to stay stuck in the rat race of the business success and struggling to maintain it. My experience is when you have business success, you invest a lot to maintain the position. And
this is a problem. Yeah, it's stressful for a lot of people. The problem with success is exactly as you said, maintaining the success. And by taking time out and giving more attention to your own needs or maybe your family, then the business may not be so successful if you don't keep your eye on what's happening. And so it's that stress of having to maintain your success that causes problems. And then eventually what maybe started out as a passion in terms of business becomes a job, becomes a chore, becomes a weight around your neck. And the important thing, I think, for people, especially entrepreneurs, anybody who has their own business or in a very high profile job, they need to get that balance. They need to let go of thinking of success and happiness in terms of material gain.
Yes, exactly.
The problem with material gain is that we become attached to it as evidence of who we are and our success. And once we become attached to it, there's a fear of losing it or not being able to maintain it. It's like getting a better car, getting a new iPhone. You know, all of this, it built into commercial products, you know, is this kind of whole kind of addiction part of the process where you become an addict and you want to get better. You want something good, you want a better good, then you want a better good, because you think that's the way things should be. But of course, happiness and success is actually not outside ourselves, it's inside ourselves.
Yes.
If we look back at our ancestors, I mean, we are here because we had some amazingly resourceful ancestors. And you ask the person in the street, you know, do they ever thank their ancestors or think about their ancestors? They think about their father or mother or their grandparents. It doesn't go much beyond that. But you say, do you ever think about the people 50,000 years ago that actually were so resourceful that you now can have this life you've got? Because without them, you wouldn't be here. And guess what? They didn't have iPhones. The closest thing they had to an iPhone was a hand axe. You know, that was the most widely distributed equivalent to an iPhone, and it was the hand axe. And all they had were two things, and they were absolutely essential. They had food and they had shelter, but they had to find them. Their whole life was about just two things, food and shelter. But now we have food, shelter, we have thousands of CDs, we have holidays, we have all this luxury, everything, but we don't actually need it. So I think people who are under any kind of stress in terms of business, in terms of whether it's their own company or it's a job, they need to step back and think, actually, what do I need to be happy? If you become attached to all of the material benefits of your work, then you will always suffer, because you'll always want better, or you'll want to try and maintain it in some way. But if you step back and say, well, actually, I don't need that, I don't need that, I don't need that. All I need to be happy is this and this and this. And then make sure that those things you do pick out are the best. So if you say, okay, I need only food and shelter, make sure your food is the best food in terms of your overall health and happiness and well-being. And then you cannot fail. You cannot be upset and stressed out and miserable, as long as you get the best of what's essential.
Wonderful.
Rather than the material gains. So that's how I feel. You know, okay, I've got CDs, I buy books. I'm in Thailand, I buy books on Amazon. I do a lot of reading. I have a lot of books. So for me, that's essential. But I'm not hoarding them. I'm not an addict. It's because it's essential for my own well-being to be educated and be able to delve into different areas of life and reality through my reading. So if you pick out what's essential and just make sure you do that well and don't become attached to all the stuff.
And the interesting thing, when I may jump on what you said, Stephen, you can do whatever you want, but you won't be able to fill the void of knowledge and the void of materialism when you just focus on the material gains. There will always be this void and this yearning. Oh, my neighbor or this other trainer has a Ferrari and I only have Aston Martin or a Porsche, and the other one has a Cartier. I need to give another training to have the Cartier too. So I can totally relate to it. And what resonates so deeply with me is that you say people deserve the best life. When I was working with a person who said to me, the problem is, David, what will I do with all the time that I have free now without the need to worry anymore? So that resonates so deeply with what you said about future focus therapy, to look beyond the fixing, to just look beyond what does the person do when the problem suddenly doesn't exist anymore. And that is one of the interesting things where the audience is so extremely curious. World Awakening Summit. What does awakening mean? Awakening into more materialism, awakening into having more income, awakening into the main red line with every person as an expert like you is coming more from the heart, coming more from the balanced center, coming more from the essence. And yesterday there was a person who said, I am waiting for that special outburst, that something needs to happen. And I said, yeah, do you know, there was someone who had talked to the spirit of a sermon. And he said, okay, you know, the sermon said to me, when I go with the flow, I simply float. When I let go of all resistance, I simply go with the stream. And this makes the abundance of me as a fish. And then she breathed so deeply. So I would love to hear your opinion about the essence of suffering of clients or people that you work with. What is the deep desire? What is your approach to help people in letting go of their suffering?
Okay. You know, over the years, I've seen people with many different kinds of problems. And it took me quite a while to realize that they all had one thing in common. And when I realized what that was, it suddenly made life very easy for me in terms of helping people. Basically, all problems are caused by reality not meeting expectations. Mm-hmm. It is. If you want something or expect something in your life and reality delivers that to you, because it's realistic in terms of time and resources, then you don't feel any kind of stress or worry because it delivers. However, if your expectations do not match with reality, there's friction, there's stress between those two, and there's unhappiness. And that's where we start to get anxious or worried, and we want to change, or we don't know how to help ourselves. We don't know how to get what we want, what we believe we need, but in fact, most of the time it's just what we want. So we have actually three choices, and those three choices dictate how I work with people in therapy. One choice is to change your expectations. So that might mean lowering your expectations to something which is actually realistic, that is attainable, given the resources and time you have available. The other is to change reality, which actually is not as difficult as it sounds. Changing reality means changing the context in which you have the problem or the perceived need. And the third choice is to do both, to change your expectations and change reality. Now, if we just go back to, when I left the UK and went to Thailand, I did both. I changed my expectation about what was important for me, because I'd become a victim of this belief that what was important for me was having an apartment in Knightsbridge, the Porsche, apartment in south of France, house in Derbyshire, all of these material things. That for me, I believed was important in terms of my well-being. So I changed my belief totally in my expectation that happiness doesn't come through that. Happiness comes from actually just having a comfortable, relaxed life. People. So that's how I changed my own expectation. At the same time, I changed my reality by taking myself out of the context in which I had that problem, or that sense of being trapped. So I moved to Thailand. So I went to a completely new context. So I changed my reality. And so when you change your expectations and your reality, it doubles your chance of being happy and successful. You don't have to do both. Sometimes it just means changing your expectation. Or just changing your reality. So an example, if someone was in a job and they felt under a lot of pressure, they could change jobs. Or they could change their expectation of what they demand of themselves. So maybe take a different position in the same job, for whatever. So if you adjust in that way and you have expectation and reality matching, then there's no stress, there's no anxiety, no worry. That's the first thing that causes problems. When I realized that, it helped me help people a lot, because when people came to me, they all had that same problem. Was their expectation didn't match reality. So my goal was just to get that in balance. The second thing, because there were two parts to the second thing, what maintains the suffering or that mismatch is attachment. People get attached to things because they believe they need it or they deserve it or whatever. So they get attached to it. And so it's like banging your head on the wall over and over again and not getting the result. It's like the rats in the maze running around the maze all the time because they can't step back and look at it objectively. What happens, we become attached to a belief that we need something to be successful, we need something to be happy. And that attachment becomes the glue which prevents us from detaching and being able to stand back. So if we're able to stand back and look at the way we're attached to things, we think that's important, the new iPhone's important, the new car's important, promotion's important. As long as we're attached to that, we don't have a choice. If we can see that we feel that way simply because of attachment, and we choose, right, okay, maybe I will have a new car, maybe I won't. Maybe I will have promotion, maybe I won't. If I just do my very best to be a great person and do a good job, maybe that'll happen all by itself without me becoming obsessively attached to that goal. As soon as you're not attached to something, it frees you up to be happy and focus on yourself and enjoy life. So there's those two things. So first of all, it was realizing how reality and expectations mismatch, and getting that balance would help people. Secondly, teaching people to not attach to the things that were causing them problems, indirectly or directly.
Extremely inspiring. And I also can relate personally to it. 2 decades ago, I had a life situation where I was facing to be on the streets and homeless and having nothing. And suddenly 600 CDs had been taken away from me and all my books. And then I said, what is important for you? That you have a roof over the head, that you will have food for tomorrow, and that you will just stay safe instead of sleeping in the snow. So this completely shifted the whole perspective of what was important. And a turning point for me was, it was 1998 when it happened, that a homeless person looked at me and said, "Boy, you are so sad. Let me give you the only thing that I have." And he saw that I didn't wear a watch at that time, and he gave me his watch. And I only remember when he gave me the very last possession that he had, then it was about time to understand what really matters. And suddenly the things changed. I got back on my feet again. I got a nice room and started to focus on work again. But what was the downward spiral? I had studied medicine in Marburg, and I wanted to conquer with a bloated ego as a natural healer and as an NLP trainer when Bandler had certified me in 1993. And I thought, yeah, you need to conquer the city, and and the bloated ego kicked my ass in a very short time. So that is extremely resonating with me, what you said. When reality and expectations start to balance, and when you change either reality or expectations or both, life shifts and becomes extremely balanced.
And the thing is not difficult. Once you can step back and see that, you can then strategically work towards that. It's when people do not know what to do, there's a serious problem, because when you have a problem, that's fine. But when you have a problem with solving, realize you can't even solve the problem. You've got 3 problems.
Yes.
And so it escalates and loops around. But if people can step back and say, right, all I have to do is get expectation to match reality, and I'm free, then it's easy, because it's very clear. You can just take stock of your life and see how reality does or doesn't match, and then adjust it. And my decision to give everything away and go to Thailand land was made in an instant. It wasn't something I thought about over months and months and months. It was literally made in one day, because it is that simple. Once you just stand back and look at how reality and expectations match or do not match, and then make those adjustments. What am I willing to let go of to truly be happy? And is it a big deal if I never see that furniture again? If I never see that car again? Yeah, it doesn't matter. You know, and the reason I actually gave everything away was because if I'd have kept it, I would still be attached to it. Yeah. I might be living up in the jungle, but I would still be attached to stuff that I kept. You understand? So it was that was an important part of that, of getting that balance, was to give it away. And to enter a life of voluntary poverty means it's not a problem, because something is only a problem if you don't want it. Yes. But when you choose to have it, it's not a problem, because you've chosen to have that life, or that experience, or that state. So that kind of choice to have voluntary poverty created enormous wealth, but not in the material sense.
Exactly.
Now, it's a big thing to ask people to do that, of course, you know, but if they can take that as an example and think, well, how can I make some adjustments in my life? Maybe not go all the way to leave my country, my home, my work, and go somewhere else, but how can I adjust it? That's the important thing. Just make to tweak it, to make some adjustments, to get some more equilibrium or balance.
And sometimes it can be easier than the brain would want to make you believe.
Yeah. Yeah, because consciously we continually sabotage ourselves, because we've built up a belief system that in order to be happy, we have to be dependent on the material gains of success. And so any thoughts of going against that, sometimes, you know, the brain will consciously try and sabotage it. And it's only because we're not stepping back and being creative and just thinking, okay. I mean, for most people, I think for most people, if someone lost everything, and there are millions of people in the world who are losing everything they have right now, okay, guess what? The next day they wake up and they're still breathing. And next day they can probably, not always, but mostly people find food and they find shelter and they survive. So even for the most successful business person, entrepreneur, whoever, if they lost everything, guess what? The next day, most of them will pick themselves up and start again. And a lot of people would actually find that was such a rewarding lesson that their life would change and they'd be happier, because they realize that at the very, very worst, they can still be happy. And that's the important thing, because when you realize if you've got nothing except food and shelter, you can be happy, then it takes away the stress and the worry of losing or not being better than someone else, or not being as successful as you demand yourself to be successful. So going to the bottom and experiencing it, voluntarily giving stuff away, is an amazing place to be, because you then know nothing can really, other than death, nothing, or extremely bad health, nothing can be a problem for me, because I've been there. I've chosen to not have anything, to not have any possessions. And guess what? I was happier than I was when I had possessions.
I can imagine. I can totally relate to it. And this so resonates with me. I had been asked in the past, what do you think a person living in a wooden hut in the desert and a billionaire could both use to find happiness and a direct uplifting reward for the soul? And the answer that a very inspiring person gave me: do everything that you do, the slightest action, combing the hair, doing the dishes, showering, with your highest vibration of love, as if the destiny of the universe would depend on how you do what you do. So by thinking, okay, I can bind my shoes, and I started to bind the shoes more conscious and more with love. I started to do the dishes instead of, oh, that mountain is a burden, you don't like to do the dishes. when I said, how do you handle the plate as if the universe would depend on how you clean it? And that so deeply resonates with what you say. When you start to shift your perception, when you know the power of the present moment is always with you, that you can act every time to give you the reward of feeling something positive. And Stephen, if you would go a little bit deeper and just act as if a client would come to you who would be attached to a lot of things, making his life stressful, making his life unhappy, making him wake up with the fear of losing what possession he has. Are there some general techniques that you apply, or that you can tell our audience how do you approach a person coming to you with a lot of attachments?
Okay, yes. If someone has a lot of attachments, it means they're a victim of their own conscious thought processes. So the way I approach that initially is as, if you like, a teacher rather than a therapist, because you have to give examples of how attachment causes problems. So I will often give a story or a metaphor, an analogy to explain the process that this patient or client is caught up in. And once they're in a position where I can see they understand what I'm saying, I will then teach them how to do that for themselves, teach them a technique to be able to not attach to thoughts and feelings. So as an example, if someone has an attachment to things, I might tell them a story, for example, that if you're sitting at home in a chair and someone knocks on the door, you have three choices. You can go and answer the door, or you can say, go away, not interested, stay sitting in the chair, or you can just stay sitting in the chair, not answer the door, not acknowledge it at all, but just say to yourself, there's someone knocking at the door. They're the three choices you have. So this is an analogy for what the brain is doing to that particular client, if you like, or pretty much everybody who's attached. So if you answer the door, what happens is the person outside now knows you're home. So they'll try and get in or try and sell you something. There's now an attachment. They've attached to you. You've attached to whatever they're telling you or trying to sell you. So you've now got to break that attachment. It becomes very difficult. If you don't open the door and you just shout, go away, okay, they haven't got in, but they now know you're home. So they may go away, but then they'll come back because they know you're home. So there's an attachment. If you sit in the chair and you just say to yourself, there's someone knocking at the door, there's someone knocking at the door, you're not denying that it's there. You're acknowledging that it's there, but there's no attachment to what that person wants. So there's a limit to how many times they will come back, if they do come back, because they don't know you're home. They think you're not there. So eventually, if it may not come back initially at all, but if they come back a couple of times, they'll only do it for a couple of times, then they'll disappear. So we have to train the brain that when a thought knocks on the door, not to go and open the door to the thought and become a victim of the content of the thought, whatever it's trying to tell us, and not to try and push the thought away by saying, I don't want you to think of that. I don't want to think of that. I don't want to think of that. We have to train the brain to just acknowledge the brain for what it's doing without becoming a victim of the content of the thought. By just saying, this brain is having a thought. It's the same as saying, there's someone knocking at the door. This brain is having a thought, because it's a statement of absolute fact and truth, but without becoming a victim of the content of the thought. So you're not pushing it away. You're not acknowledging it and becoming part of the thought. You're just acknowledging simply what the brain is doing as a process. This brain is having a thought. This brain is having a thought. And if people do this, and they do it repeatedly, this brain's having a thought, this brain's having a thought, when they feel a strong emotion, whether it's fear, anger, jealousy, any feeling or emotion, it's always triggered by a thought. They may not be aware of it, but it's triggered by a thought and a feeling. There's a loop that occurs. The thought produces a feeling, then there's a thought about the feeling, produces another feeling, it loops around. It gets worse for many people. If people ever feel that, just close the eyes, be aware of that thought and feeling. Don't try and push it away. Don't buy into it, become a victim of it. Just say over and over to yourself, this brain's having a thought. This brain's having a thought. This brain's having a thought. This brain is having a thought. This brain is having a thought. This brain is having a thought. And as you do that, become very, very aware of just how profound that statement is. Because it's the only thing we know to be true, that the brain is having a thought. All of the content and the beliefs that the thoughts give you is just based on perception. It's not based on reality.
Wonderful.
But what is based on reality is the brain having a thought. So we're going as close to the truth of what's happening as we can. And because it's so truthful and based on fact, the brain listens. This brain's having a thought. This brain, and of course now it becomes a statement of fact. The brain's having a thought, the brain's having a thought, and the thought that the brain is now having is this brain's having a thought. That's the new thought. And it replaces the old thought that previously caused the stress or the problem or the emotions.
It even can become a belief system when worries try to knock again at the door, that the person simply thinks, oh, I'm just having a thought. Oh, yes. My brain is just having a thought.
This brain, not even my brain. We don't want to attach to the brain. If we say my brain, we're attached to it. It's just we're like a machine, right? We are machines, organic machines. So this brain is having a thought. This brain is having a thought. And what happens if you repeat that? What will happen without going back to see if the thought is still there or the feeling's still there? Just repeat it until you just don't need to do it anymore. You just feel it and don't need to do it anymore. What happens is the emotion, the feeling, and even the thought disappears, because there's three kind of responses when you do this. One is that you have the thought still, but the feeling has changed. You don't feel bad anymore. It's a different feeling. The other response is the thought is there, but there's no feeling at all. Zero feeling. The third response is the thought and the feeling disappear completely, and you can't even remember what the thought was. So if I'm doing this with clients, I get some clients coming in to see me, and they come in with this problem. I teach them how to do this for themselves. I do it with them. No hypnosis. Don't need hypnosis for this. I do this with them. And then they open their eyes and they say, okay, try and get that thought and feeling back. What's happened to it? And they actually have amnesia for the reason they came into therapy. That shows you how powerful this is. It's the most simplest thing in the world, but it's incredibly powerful because it works on the origin of every single problem. The brain giving a thought that creates a bad feeling. So if you break that loop, so there's non-attachment to the thought, then the thought has no purpose anymore. It's not getting a result from you.
The magnet is reaching out without finding anything to look into.
Yeah, and it goes. It's like the person knocking at the door. There's no reason for it being there anymore. So it just goes.
Extremely inspiring. And would you agree? I have the perception and understanding that you advise to be just the observer instead of the participant in what is going on. So when thoughts are occurring, just understand that there will be thoughts from the moment you wake up until you go to sleep, but instead of allowing them to glue in your existence, just observe them and accept that that the brain is having a thought.
On a day-to-day basis, as thoughts come in, you can do that. It's basically mindfulness. What you're describing is mindfulness, where a thought comes in, we kind of let it go. What I'm describing is not mindfulness. Mm-hmm. This is a deliberate therapeutic strategy which disconnects the thought from the feeling. So it's not the same as mindfulness. The principle is the same, but the practice of mindfulness, as in mindfulness meditation or as prescribed in therapy very often nowadays, or as part of cognitive behavioral therapy, that practice is different. It takes a long time to be mindful of every thought and letting it go. What I'm talking about here is specifically working on a problem, a particular symptom, you know, in terms of an emotional or bad feeling, a fear, a phobic response, or whatever, working specifically on that and using this technique so that the client is no longer attached to the thought, and so the thought goes away and they're free from that problem forevermore, because people don't relapse. You know, I did a presentation in London, just a one evening presentation in London in August. We had 350 people come, and there was a woman there at the back. She was from Croatia. Her name was Maria. And I asked in the audience to various people, you know, on courses, and to anybody, give me some examples, you know, how have you used this on yourself or with other people? Maria, she said, I'm a psychotherapist, and I use this with post-traumatic stress, with war veterans from Croatia. She said, I've used this roughly about 150 patients, and I've used exactly what you've just demonstrated, because I demonstrated it, exactly what you demonstrated. And she said, I learned it from you 5 years ago. And every single one of those veterans, 150 people, they were detached from their feeling. They no longer had post-traumatic stress. She said, we followed it up, and we haven't had any relapses, not one relapse of the post-traumatic stress disorder.
That's 100%.
100%. And I was blown away by that, because I didn't know this. And it was just amazing. And this was broadcast live on the internet, you know, on Facebook. We had that streaming live. So all that, yeah. And so other people put their hands up, and I said, you know, how are you using it? How are you using it? And then, so we know this works incredibly well. I mean, I'd never had that kind of feedback immediately about so many patients being helped. So we know this works. And the amazing thing is people can do it for themselves. You don't need to go to a doctor or psychotherapist to experience this. You can practice it yourself if you want to. You know, you've got to understand what you have to do, obviously. There has to be a structure to it. I do teach it. I teach it on courses. I should teach a course just on this. But, you know, to be honest, it's a technique that can change your life, which you can teach in an afternoon.
Oh, yeah.
People don't need a 6-week course or a year course. They can learn it in an afternoon.
Doing an interview about World Awakening Summit.
Yeah, well, there you go. You know, I'm writing a book about this, but the problem I have is, you know, it's not going to be a thick book. It's only going to be like a dozen pages, because I can explain it in a dozen pages. So I don't need a thick volume to teach people how to do it.
And it even works faster than having read a dozen pages. That's a miracle.
It's so far to date, with all the research we've got, it's more effective than any other therapy. I mean, cognitive behavioral therapy is great. Mindfulness training is great. NLP is great. But all of them still take a long time, and they cost a lot of money for training therapists, for treatment in the National Health Service in the UK, for example. This client, and they completely lost their emotion, their feeling, their fear, whatever it was. And we followed up, because they all came back 10 days later on a one-day course, and they reported they'd had no relapses, their feelings had gone altogether, and they'd already started making moves towards a new future, making new choices, changing their lives in some way. So as it opens up, it frees people. When you get rid of something which holds you back, or it frees you to move forward. So this isn't just about fixing problems, it's about people going forward and making a difference to their lives and the lives of others. And it's so incredibly simple. And you know, that wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have learned how to do that or discovered that unless I'd have gone to Thailand. Because after I left the UK, the reason I went to Thailand was to meditate and focus on myself and see if I could find the root cause to all suffering, not just individual problems, something in common, all problems. And that's what I discovered. And I discovered that technique. And when I first used it, I thought it was just a fluke, just lucky. And I used it again and again and again and again and again. And it worked every single time, 100%. So I thought, wow, this is amazing. And I don't feel I'm special. It's almost like someone delivered that to me, through me, because I don't recall suddenly going, wow, I'm enlightened. I just suddenly got this technique. It just sort of evolved within me. And then I thought, this is somehow feels right. I'm not sure. Is there anything missing? Is something wrong? And I just did it. And the first person I did it with, it worked. I thought, wow. You know, there's another component to it where we have love and compassion in the hands. We place it on the feeling as part of that technique. That's not always necessary. It helps if you do that. But for people watching now, you can just do this anyway. Just say, when you have that emotion, that feeling, just say, this brain's having a thought, this brain's having a thought, this brain's having a thought. And keep doing it until you don't need, you don't need to do it anymore. You don't have to check the feeling, see if it's gone. That's like answering the door. So is the feeling still there? It's like opening the door. You just do it until intuitively, you just somehow know something's happened. And then you try and get the feeling and the thought back and see how you get on.
I am completely sure, Stephen, and I definitely will forward the feedback to you when the summit will be broadcasted and the recording will be uploaded, that there will be a lot of feedback how brilliant this interview has been and how extremely valuable your inspiration is.
Well, you know, if people do this at home, and if for some reason it doesn't work as well as they expected, there's two things you can do. One is because they haven't understood exactly how to do it, because it has to be done correctly, in which case they need to maybe watch some videos online of me doing it. Okay, and I can send you some links for that. Okay, and secondly, some people think, well, that's worked, but it's impossible. How can it work? It's too good to be true. Okay, and when people come to me and say, well, it worked, but it won't last, will it? It won't last. I'd say, well, you've got a doubt? I said, yes. I said, how does the doubt feel? I said, well, it's like here. I said, okay, let's use the technique on the doubt.
Yeah,
so
that's what I was thinking. The brain is someone the thought of doubt.
Yeah, so doubt is only a thought. It's the same thing again. So you use the same technique on the doubt. And sometimes they'll use the technique and they'll say, well, I've still got the thought, but the feeling's changed. It's no longer like a really kind of stressful feeling or tension. It's like a kind of like a mild kind of like a feeling down here or something. Say, okay, we'll do the same technique now on that feeling. And the most I've ever had to do it is maybe 6 times. You know, the feeling will change maybe 6 times and it's gone altogether. It always goes all together, but you may have to do it more than once. So if the first time people do it, it's not as successful as they thought, it may be because they then have to do it again on the second feeling, the evolution of that feeling, how it's changed. And if it hasn't worked at all, which is very unlikely, it's very unlikely that it's not going to work at all. But if it doesn't seem to work at all, it's because they haven't done the technique correctly. So they need to watch me do it.
This brings me to the question, Stephen, please share how people can reach you, your website.
Okay, well, as you said earlier, what I do is something called future-focused therapy. And it really doesn't mean anything, does it? It means that change is all about the future, because therapy is not about the past, really. It's about how life is after the therapy. And so it's a name which suggests the way I work. It doesn't describe what I do, but it describes the orientation of my work. So my website is called futurefocusedtherapy.com. But I do different things. So and the courses, I run the hypnotherapy diploma course and Erickson hypnosis diploma in the summer school in London every year in August as a 3-week course. I also do a retreat in a Buddhist temple. So it's the other extreme from hypnosis to a Buddhist retreat to do with non-attachment, you know, a combination of meditation and psychotherapy. So I dabble in these different areas of consciousness. It's not just like straightforward clinical hypnosis. I approach psychotherapy and hypnotherapy very much from a Buddhist angle, because I was Buddhist since I was like a teenager. I became Buddhist when I was like 14, thanks to a school teacher who introduced me to Buddhism. And so it's like a backbone, if you like, of my work anyway. And of course, what I'm teaching you here with This Brain's Having a Thought is a kind of a Buddhist principle of non-attachment. Mm-hmm. So it's not totally unique. It's 2,600 years old, the principle. Just no one's ever taken it and made it into a brief effective psychotherapy.
Yes.
That's what I've done, basically. So, yeah, future focused therapy, people can find me there. But and alternatively, type in Stephen, that's a PH, Stephen Brooks, hypnosis into Google, and a wealth of stuff will come up as well about my work in hypnosis and therapy. Because I've been teaching hypnosis for 30 years, something like that now, altogether, apart from the break I had when I just became a hermit living in a cave in Thailand. Didn't live in a cave really. I lived in a little old wooden house by a waterfall, which I don't recommend because it's very damp. But it allowed me to be free from the material world and just meditate.
Stephen, do you possibly have something to drink close to you?
I have a glass.
Let's drink as I express my gratitude for this tremendous value you delivered and for the wonderful quality time.
Thank you.
To happiness and a wonderful life for everybody who watches.
Absolutely. We all deserve to have incredible lives. And can I just finish with one thought? And that is, the worst thing is to one day lie on your deathbed and look back and have regrets. That is to regret you didn't focus on the right areas of your life, that you didn't do enough, that you didn't maybe love enough or care enough about others. I think if you focus on that moment, think, in my future, I want to look back and go, wow, that was a wonderful life because I made a difference and because I cared. Because to think that you didn't care and you had no influence, nothing happened, and you could have done something, but you didn't, must be the worst feeling in the world. And the last thing you want before you pass away is to think that you were not good enough, that you didn't do enough with the life that you were given. So I finish with that because I think if you focus on that moment, it puts everything into perspective, and you start to change how you interact with others and how you interact with the world, because you want to be able to look back one day and go, wow, that was amazing.
There couldn't be a better closure than this. So I wouldn't be surprised, everybody watching, if you watch this interview over and over again, you will find inspiration every time you watch. So Stephen and I say goodbye to your wow life from the heart.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and mine too.
Goodbye.